we're doing a Lich's Lair. And what Lich's Lair is a segment on the show where we have a member of our community, someone who has created some type of homebrew and done so as completely and as with much of an eye to detail as possible, trying to create something that is worthy of the, well, in many ways, the kind of work that we strive for with our rubric is to try and make content that's as good as the content that Wizards makes, which is an incredibly tall task. That is what dear friend and member of the community, DFroGGotten1, has for us today. He's created a race option, the Pixie race option, and we're going to go through and we're going to analyze it, and we're going to talk about it, and using our rubric here, and just see what he's come up with, and see where it can be improved, and just overall kind of rate its quality. Yeah.
Yeah, we're very excited to look at this. I know Frog's created a lot of awesome homebrew in the past and shared it on our Discord. You can get there by visiting our website, dndtime.stream, and just adding the hashtag Discord to the end, and that'll bring you right to our Discord server. But yeah, he's shared a bunch of awesome stuff there in the past, including an earlier version of this Pixie. So I'm very excited to see where we're at with this first, like,
revised,
what do we want to call it? Yeah, revised draft.
It always makes me really happy to see people go back and do revisions on stuff that they've already kind of submitted to Fantasy Labs, because nothing gets to be perfect and to be great polished homebrew without revisions. Like, me and Jeremy are practicing what we preach on that. Like, we don't just kind of say that and then makes things in one shot. Like, anything that you see us do goes through a lot of revisions. I think you saw some of those processes with our bards. So you've got to revise to make great content. And I'm really excited to see what Frog's got. So do you want to bring Frog up, Jeremy?
Yeah, Pete, you bring Frog up. But just so that people are aware, when we're talking about our Fantasy Labs rubric, like, a pretty good first draft gets 2 points out of these 5. A pretty good revised draft gets, like, 3. If you're hitting 4 or 5, you're like, damn. Like, you're in really good shape. So I'm very excited to see this. This is the first race option we've had for Fantasy Labs as well. Oh, wait, Pete. I haven't done the thing for Lich's Lair yet.
Anyway, Jeremy, take us into the Lich's Lair.
We're about to enter the Lich's Lair.
Puny mortals, dare you to enter into the Lich's Lair?
All right, we're back.
That's the thing.
We're returned.
I don't know how long that takes.
I don't know how that works either. Anyway, guys,
are we muted while that's going on?
Yeah, we're muted while that's going on.
Mannyworks says that's not how Lemick sounds. Well, that's just another person. It's an image of Lemick and then a voiceover.
Yeah, exactly. Lemick would never have said anything like that. Anyway, Pete, we got a special guest with us right now, don't we?
Frog. Hello, Frog. How are you tonight? Yes.
I'm good. I'm good.
Frog, you're about to brave the Lich's Lair, a challenge unlike any in the lands of D&D time or Fantasy Labs, as the case may be today, where you have to present your masterpiece that you've shown to see if it's worthy of being taken in to the Lich's Lair, or else your soul may be forever devoured in his phylactery, by which I mean you might have to do another revision. So we kind of already mentioned this a little bit, but why don't you tell us a bit about what you're bringing for us today? Because this is your second take on this Pixie.
Yes. Well, my original take was a bit more complicated than this one. However, I did make it where, at least in my opinion, it'll be a little bit more balanced, has a little bit more flavor to it, and also incorporates some more from like Forgotten Realms and all that. So I'm actually hoping they'll pass through this.
We'll have to wait and see. We haven't had anyone completely survive the Lich's Lair yet, and we do not exaggerate when we say it is, one, very brave to open yourself up to this like really intense critique that we do on Lich's Lair, and also it's really hard to pass Lich's Lair. So I'm excited to see how you fare and how things go.
Yeah, I remember the first time I put this through, it got 2 out of 5.
Well,
Well, that
hopefully,
was just in our brief
Yeah.
chat.
yeah,
Yeah,
that
it
was
was
like
a brief,
that was the
yeah,
workshop.
but
But this is the real run through. But I'm ready to I'm ready to begin on this. Do you
Yeah,
want to start
but
reading through this guy?
just a quick question, Frog, before we even jump into the mechanics, because this is very different than like a subclass or something that we would typically do for, that we've typically done on Lich's Lair. Frog, can you just give us a little bit of background for like, what are you trying to do here? Because obviously it's a Pixie race option, but what does that like mean to you, right? What is this Pixie? Is it like what you're the classical like Tinkerbell kind of deal, or what's the direction you're going for at this, so that we can kind of think about the flavor and the space of it in the context of 5e?
Well, honestly, I would say it's a various mix of things, but it all keeps to the original. I guess the original feel of a fine little fairy that's mischievous and such.
Okay, so you're trying to be able to fill a lot of niches here.
Yeah, but
in
at
a
the same
lot of
time,
ways. Go ahead, Frank.
but yeah, but I was gonna say at the same time, while it does feel a little niches, it also tries to keep to the pretty much the original lore of pixies that you'll probably commonly see in most like myths and even little fairy tales.
Just gonna say, in a lot of ways, it seems like you're trying to like, in maybe a little bit more detail, bring the pixie that you see in the monster manual to life as a playable race.
Yep, and then some.
Okay. Well, I want to just start going through this thing. Would you like us to read this, Frog, as we're going through?
Go, be my guest.
All right. Then we will take it away. Mind if I start with the beginning flavor here, Jeremy?
Please, Pete, take it away.
So we have a little quote, and this is common, and I really like that Frog included this for the Pixie race. On sylvan wings of moonlight gleam, tricksters from one's midsummer dream, their friend and fiend and in between, those pixies that have enchanted me, an elven explorer. A cool little poem here to start bringing you into like the flavor of the pixie, which I love to see those on races. But
yeah, I love that you've included that. Actually.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people forget the quote, which I forgot the quote. The first one that reminded me, Jeremy, you put a quote on, I think it was the Undead, and I forgot that you were supposed to put quotes on races. I was like, oh, that's awesome.
Well, one of the things about a quote, right, is it tells you so much about what you're going for here, right? This tells you everything that you need to know, right? Sylvan wings, moonlit gleam, tricksters, fiend and friend, enchantment. All of these words that are in this little quote give us actually a pretty strong idea of the direction that I think you're going for. So I like that you've included that. Definitely.
It creates a tone for the race in a lot of ways, which is important in establishing flavor. And flavor, like the flavor point, when we're talking about subclasses, the flavor point takes the back seat in a lot of places to other ones, but in races, the flavor point is a lot more important because that's what races are. They're not really about their mechanics. Some of them have really good mechanics, and they need to be balanced properly, but
others are very simple.
Classes are really mechanically heavy, but flavor is what carries the rate of race, and it's going to define your flavor as a character for a really long time, for the whole campaign usually. So, just want to emphasize how much we're going to be paying attention to that as we go through. But let me finish the opening read here.
Mm-hmm.
Pixies are mischievous sprites that enjoy playing pranks on people. Such pranks include leading travelers astray and tricking misers into parting with their wealth. Those who decide to leave the comfort and protection of their communal frolic or a village for mostly pixies tend to absorb other magics and grow larger, going from tiny creatures under a foot tall to just about the size of a young halfling child. Do you want to take the next chunk, Jeremy?
Yeah, a familiar sight of the Feywild. Pixies are one of the most common denizens of the Feywild, but are also one of the most unseen yet most present simultaneously. In their normal forms, they resemble tiny elves with gossamer, moth-like wings and love to wear bright-colored clothing. However, that is only if they wish to present themselves. They normally stay hidden from humanoids and other big folk. However, the pixies who leave their frolic for adventure find it hard to hide themselves or use their original powers for such. All right.
Pixie names. As fae who live in and love nature, as well as easily entertained with music and pranks, the names of pixies revolve around flora, simple musical instruments and sounds, and even some food-related items and ingredients. Family names are normally only kept by pixies of noble bloodlines traced back to the courts. I really like that little detail. I think that's a cool option. That family names are just for kind of like the royals to track their lineage. I think that's cool. But some example pixie names you have here: Sugar, Jingle, Daisy, Cosmos, Pepper, Honey, Pine, Tootie, Quiche, Cookie, Wriggling. They all sound like pixie names for sure, archetypical pixie names. I know some of these are or at least one in particular is a reference to some D&D time, with Pastry here as well. Whizzle, Verdance, Sherbet, Whimsy, Diani, Celia, and Belphoebe. There we go. Belphoebe. Those are all cool names. I like the, again, I'm really into that little family names flavor. But we'll go through and read everything before we go back and start discussing it. So you want to just dive into the pixie traits here, Jeremy?
Yeah, pixie traits. Your pixie character has the following traits. Your dexterity and charisma scores increase by 1. Age. Pixies do not age as normal races do, and after reaching maturity do not die except from fatal wounds or disease. Pixies are immune to magical aging effects. Alignment. Almost all pixies are good with chaotic ideals of freedom. Simply having fun and enjoying life are typically at the forefront of their desires. Size. Due to the splendid magical environments the pixies who stray far from the Feywilds reside in, their size is larger than that of an average pixie, ranging from 1.5 to 2 feet tall, and weighing in at an average of 20 pounds. Your size is small. Your base walking speed is 25 feet, and your base flying speed is 15 feet. Altered Fae. You may be born as a Fae, but the magic you have accumulated has some unseen effects. Your creature type is Fae rather than humanoid. Enchantment spells and all magical effects that specifically target humanoids can still target you. Attuned to nature. You can empathize with forests, its denizens, and the land itself, and your proficiency in the nature skill. Cold iron aversion. As a non-attuned Fae creature, your sensitivity is to pure iron, gives you problems. You have vulnerability to piercing, slashing, and bludgeoning damage from weapons made of iron. Additionally, you have disadvantage on checks made with using any iron equipment. Gossamer wings. You have beautiful yet frail gossamer wings made of sylvan magic. You have a flying speed of 15 feet while not wearing medium or heavy armor. While flying, you produce a sprinkling of pixie dust usable only by pixies. You are under the effects of the magical effects of feather fall, as long as you're not stunned, grappled, or incapacitated, or have your wings broken. Your wings can be broken broken by either a feature from your subrace or from a successful attack made with disadvantage that targets them. When your wings are broken, you lose all the features of the gossamer wings and pixie dust until you take a long rest to magically regrow them. And then continuing, pixie dust. You can produce pixie dust like any other pixie. At 3rd level, you can cast Sleep. At 2nd level, once using this trait and regain its ability after a long rest. At 5th level, you can use an action and bestow the flying speed of your gossamer wings on a medium or smaller creature until the end of your next turn, and regain the ability to do so after a short or long rest. And the armor restrictions from gossamer wings still apply to the targeted creature. Additionally, if you know any enchantment spell of 3rd level or lower, you may use your pixie dust in place of the listed material components. Pixie mischievousness. You have advantage on dexterity and charisma saving those against spells and other magical effects. Languages you can read, speak, and write Common and Sylvan. And there are subrace options.
Okay.
You want to take the Cloud Pixie first subrace?
Yes, but I think actually this might be a good place to start.
Okay.
Like, just because there was a lot to go
I agree.
over there. Yeah.
May I start with this, Pete?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the first thing that this is a very minor quip, but when I was reading this, it felt a little weird to immediately jump into the size part in that first kind of opening thing. I think maybe I would have a certain subsection specifically relating to the size of the pixie, right? Because you have a familiar sight in the Feywild and then pixie names. I would say, maybe a familiar sight in the Feywild and describe that stuff relating to them being in the Feywild originally.
I imagine you could make a heading called something like "Pixies in the Material Plane" to talk about this phenomenon that you're speaking of.
Mm-hmm. Or Pixies as a playable class, right? As a playable race, even would be a flavor better.
The flavor you probably want to go Pixies as adventurers would probably be the phrase you want to use for that. To keep it abstract, but make sure you're talking about PC Pixies.
All right.
Yep. So that was kind of just my first thought is, I think you could use a little bit more breaking down and just organization there, because it kind of felt like you were jumping between size and Pixie community and then the Feywild and then back to size. So that's one thing I remember. Also, one thing in Pixie names, I would recommend adding Puck to that list.
I can see that.
Classic. Come on.
That's a great point. You pretty much always see references like that in like jokes and stuff that Wizards does, and it's good to like kind of bind those things in. Like it's actually like I would say good design and flavor to bind those things into stuff that people are readily able to like relate to and understand. Beyond just the fact that it's a classic, like it has extra, I think, meaning to do that. So I think that's a great point, Jeremy.
Yeah, and along the same kind of vibe, I really liked when you said traced back to the courts. I would specifically reference to the Seelie and Unseelie courts of the Feywild, just because that doesn't immediately, when people see traced back to the courts, that doesn't for someone who doesn't know much about the Feywild, they don't understand. That doesn't give them anything to look for. When you say the Seelie and Unseelie courts of the Feywild, right? That's something that they could be like, oh, Google Seelie courts, and start getting that next kind of tie-in of information.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's minor quibbles. I just wanted to touch on that flavor aspect first.
Yeah. We're gonna do a lot of fine point stuff. I want to go through. Actually, can we go through all of these things in the main section one at a time, and then we'll talk about them in regards to the rubric maybe a bit after?
Yeah, absolutely.
So ability score increase, dexterity and charisma scores both increase by 1. That is atypical. Kind of like the Triton, I think, is the only other one that has has a 3-1 instead of the 2-in-1 or a 2-in-2 or something like that. But there's no problem with that. It's cool.
I think that's necessarily true, is it?
I thought Triton's was the only one that did 3 different +1s, because I know you're also going to give
well, there's also Warforged.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah.
I mean, I guess I just wasn't considering that some of these pixies. I just assumed that the sub races either upped that dex or charisma.
No, they up different things, except for one. I think ups dex.
One ups charisma.
One ups charisma as well. So
one ups charisma, one ups dex.
Okay.
It is.
That is definitely a little strange, but there's no real issue with it necessarily.
Yeah, agreed. It's just atypical, but it works fine. And I think the flavor works as well for the Pixie. Dex and Charisma are definitely the two that I would have thought as well. Age, immune to magical aging effects is technically, it's a ribbon. It's cool. And I think he did a good job with the age. Age is normal races do, reaching maturity, but do not die except from fatal wounds or diseases. I think that all works very well. Are you in agreement, Jeremy?
Yeah, I think so. I was trying to think man, are there really implications? Because I know there are some monsters, right, that age pixies, or I'm sorry, that age monster people, playable characters. And my thought was, is that really a problem that you're defeating those threats? Because usually against those monsters, like a sphinx, for example, or a ghost with this horrifying banshee with this horrifying banshee or ghost, one or the other. That's the central tension in fighting those monsters a lot of the time is the aging. But I don't think that's necessarily an issue here.
Yeah, I think it's niche enough that it will just be cool when it comes up, rather than it being a problematic. I think if
elves live 900 years, so it's basically immortal.
Yeah, I was also gonna say if the campaign is such that you're being exposed to aging effects constantly, there's probably some larger issues.
Yeah, there's gonna be bigger problems than that.
But I think that's fine.
Yeah.
But I can see an argument to remove it as well. Alignment, I think the alignment is great. Don't change a thing. I think we talked about that last time, that we both liked the alignment on that, but the phrasing on that is great. The size thing, it is...
and just to, actually, I'm sorry, just on the alignment, words like are typically at the forefront of their desires. That's exactly the kind of thing for anyone else working on your own race that you want to have when you're talking about alignment. You don't want to say they are this, but you can say typically, stuff like words that give flex to the player, but still give you a strong idea of your thoughts as the creator are good. Sorry, go on, Pete.
No problem. The size thing. So you made them small. Like typically, everyone just assumes when you think of a pixie, you think of a tiny creature, like your Tinkerbells of the world, and you made them small, which I think is the right move. There's a lot of implications that come from being tiny and overcoming traps and things of that nature. So being tiny is a lot bigger boon. And it also, there's not a lot of mechanics for tiny player races. So
yeah,
that is why Frog went with small here, and that is, I think, the right choice. If you were going to make them tiny, it would have to be a major facet of the race and really be discussed. I don't know how one would even do it.
Well, small is definitely, I think, the right direction.
Yeah. So I think that you made the right choice there.
So the one question I actually have about that, right? You're saying, due to the splendid magical environments the pixies who stray from the Feywilds reside in. That implies that, like, I don't know, I guess I'm not sure I totally understand what you are going for with that. I think what you're going for, correct me if I'm wrong, Frog, is because pixies spend less time in the Feywild, these pixies spend less time in the Feywild, the Fey magic that makes them tiny has worn off. Is that what you're going for? Or are you implying some sort of magical transformation that has occurred?
The latter would be more around that, because like I imagine like the Feywild is like something that they are more accustomed to, as well as their bodies, and going to is also probably like, what's the best way to put it? Like the Feywild, I imagine, is a great magical place.
Gotcha.
However, when they leave the Feywild, I think it's like the magic decompresses. It allows them to grow, as well as take in unfamiliar magics to help replenish that missing magic from around them.
I'm understanding you. I think it needs a little bit stronger. Like, don't get me wrong, the decision to go small, and even it was a magical premise for why they're small instead of tiny, is good. I like that just conceptually, but I think you need a bit of a stronger backbone for the size. Some adventures may take place entirely in the Feywild. Then why is my pixie small? Right?
Yeah.
I'm in the Feywild. I've always been in the Feywild. What might be interesting, and I've seen this before, I think mostly on races, but I mean on subclasses, but you could have a little table in there, and maybe that would go in the size section right beforehand, which would have reasons you're small, right? It could be you were cursed by a traveling satyr, right? Maybe one is you dipped your foot in the sacred well of some so-and-so. I mean, there's a lot of reasons you could come up with, right? You passed through a magical barrier while traversing the Feywild or other realms that caused you to grow in size.
You were born under the sign of the giant god X.
Yeah, I think there are some ways that, like, maybe just like a D6 table and just maybe a sentence of, for a variety of reasons, including spending too much time away from the Feywild, pixies are small.
Yeah, and as Jeremy was discussing earlier, the size thing, I imagine some of that will also be very much helped by adding that whole extra section to talk about the size of things.
All right.
Just because I didn't understand from what you have in that statement there, what exactly you'd meant. And I get it now that you've explained it, but I do think it could definitely use a little bit more of like, hey player, this might be something cool to think about for your character's backstory, right?
Yeah.
And even a really simple, if you wanted to go less crazy, right? It's like you were born outside of the Feywild, right?
Like,
or something like that.
A
wizard attempted to conjure you.
I was gonna say, let's move on to speed. For speed, we have your base walking speed is 25 feet. Your base flying speed is 15 feet. And correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the convention on that would be, since you're later on listing the flying speed in the Gosper Wings feature, I believe convention would be to just say that the walking speed is 25 feet, correct?
That I'm not positive.
I believe that's the model that's outlined in the Aarakocra, which does flight. I believe flight is a separate feature on the race.
It is a separate feature.
I did look
I'm
at
not
Eric Cochran. It listed both of them in both cases.
It may have.
Interesting. Well, then if that is the convention, then good job. I was unclear on that.
Well, keep in mind that I don't have the actual book to that. I just looked it up online, and it's pretty much the same respect. So,
yeah, another thing to consider potentially with that, I'm not sure they use the word base in there. I think this might be walking speed.
Let me get the.
That doesn't really.
Well,
that's
we're already
minutia.
talking about it.
But I think there are more important things to discuss besides the language of that particular feature.
It does say base, and the flying speed is on a separate feature. So that was my instinct was right on that one. So
there you go.
just leave it on the Gossamer Wings, and you don't need it on the thing, but keep base. Altered Fey, elegant way of doing Fey. I thought you did a good job on this little feat here. You are a Fey, but the things that would target humanoids can also target you. It's a good way of doing it while getting to have the fun of being a Fey. And when I need to find someone uses divine sense for a Fey creature, and you show up as that, which is fun, and something that people will enjoy that play this. But I can't see any potential faults with this design in terms of that being overpowered.
I think the direction I would go with here, though, is you put a lot of flavor text in there, and this might be one of the parts you might need to pare down, where it might be easier to just say, you count as both humanoid and Fey. Your creature type counts as both humanoid and Fey. And that might be the only place you need to leave that, right? Specifically talking about enchantment spells and magical effects. Or what if it's an evocation spell that affects it? Does that not... You know what I mean? I think you're being too specific to a point where it's like,
I don't think enchantment should be included. It should just be spells and all magical. Because
I don't think you need that. I think you can just say, your creature type is both Fey and humanoid. For the purposes of spells and other magical effects to target, you could do that, or you just leave it as that.
I mean, that would condense it a bit. So yeah, I can see.
I think it would be that simple. I'm worried about the other. I guess, one humanoid. I guess everything that targets humanoid would target that.
Yeah, well, okay. Here's a great example from the Unearthed Arcana Centaur, because there was an Unearthed Arcana Centaur that had the same feature, right? Hybrid nature. You have two creature types, humanoid and monstrosity. You can be affected by any game effect if it would. You can be affected by a game effect if it works on either of your creature types. Yeah, I mean, I think you could have something pretty similar with that.
I think you could just actually copy and paste that, since that's the convention, and just change it to Fey instead of monstrosity.
Right.
Just because I think there's just a little too much assumed in here, I guess.
Yeah.
What's this next one, Pete? Attuned to nature.
Yes. You can empathize with the forest. Its denizens align itself. You have proficiency with the nature skill. No issue for me there. One thing that maybe goes against, and this is a small gripe, the flavor of the nature skill, because nature is an intelligence-based skill, which is you are knowledgeable about nature. So saying you can empathize with the forest and the land itself doesn't necessarily sound to me like that would give you proficiency in nature. That almost sounds to me more like you would have animal handling from that little flavor in the front, but I see no issue with giving the pixies proficiency in nature, because that also makes sense to me. You might just want to maybe change the wording to reflect that they have knowledge of the land rather than can empathize with the land.
All right.
And Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm done.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say, along a similar nature, when it comes to a proficiency, and this is something that Pete and I may even mess up frequently, typically, you'll have the name of the feature. Let's give an example. Of course, I can't find it right. I can't find anything with a feature right now. Goodness. Natural athlete on the Goliath, right? You have proficiency in the athletic skill. That's all the feature says. Keen sight, which is an elf feature. You have proficiency in the perception skill. This should just say attuned to nature. you have proficiency in the nature skill. If the feature's name on the on the race option doesn't speak for itself, right? If you need to have this extra sentence of descriptive, that at least in this section, right, in the stat block section, then maybe it's something to consider. Is it worth even putting on there? In this case, I can get it. Like, their nature, sure, I buy that. I just don't think you necessarily have to have that extra text in there. Because one of the big things that can really, at least when you're creating content for other people see lots of stuff and they go, I'm not going to read that. And so where you can trim things down and make it a little more straightforward, that might be a place to do it.
All right.
Agreed.
Now that sentence maybe belongs somewhere else in like the lore section beforehand, but that's just a note about that.
Let's talk cold iron aversion. As a interesting failure sensitivity, so this gives you vulnerability to basically physical damage from weapons made of iron, and disadvantage on checks made using any iron equipment. That is an extremely brutal drawback to playing this race, especially at early levels, which is where most campaigns take place, which is something to consider because race matters more early on than it does later in the game, mechanically speaking. Most of basically any weapon that anyone's using is going to be made of iron or a derivative of iron. I don't know if, like, I think most DMs, for example, would rule that steel would attribute to this because that's an iron-based thing. I don't know if that's... you use the phrase
the
pure
intent
iron.
looks to be pure iron, yeah.
But I think that there would be a lot of people that would potentially misinterpret that. And like, it took me a while to realize that was the intent, was it to just be something that's just raw iron. But I'm a little bit worried about this feature's drawbacks. And I don't know if you could phrase that in a way that wouldn't still open it up to those issues. Vulnerability is pretty harsh.
2 comments about it. First, just get rid of it, Frog. That's just my personal thought. In 5th edition D&D, playable characters don't get mechanical drawbacks like that. In Vola's Guide to Monsters, there are a couple on playable races, but they didn't go over well. People don't like them. It's not fun in the context of how 5e works. That's why they even went so far as to reprint the orc just without the negative intelligence modifier. They made a new orc. Like, they retconned the thing that they made in Vola's Guide to Monsters and replaced it. So I would recommend absolutely not doing that. Every time I've seen someone play a druid that they didn't want, like, that they made their character, they were all excited to play it, and then there's that one little section, right, in the druid's stat block that says, druids will not wear armor made of metal. It's not even their stat block, it's somewhere in the flavor text. And because they used will not instead of like this, typically druids don't, like we see up here with the alignment, people see that, it's so hard for them to reconcile. It's like, yeah, but the character I made doesn't care. Like, that has nothing to do with the character that I built, who I'm playing using the druid class. That kind of, like, I get that this maybe makes more sense in the lore of it. I just don't, I don't know. I don't see this ever being fun for someone playing the Pixie. Even if it makes perfect sense in the lore, I don't see this being enjoyable. If that makes, at least that's just me. I'm just not seeing it.
Let me throw my thoughts out as well. I agree with Jeremy at least wholeheartedly on vulnerability to piercing, slashing, bludgeoning damage because I'm worried that the way a lot of people are going to interpret from weapons made of iron as from weapons. And I don't think there's any way to reconcile that. The disadvantage on checks made using iron equipment is maybe a touch more reasonable of a drawback. This is something that we had actually, I think when you went over the Pixie last time, we talked about this exact thing and we kind of expressed similar opinions. I noticed you still kept it.
Yeah.
Because I assume that's because that this is something that's you really like about this race and that resonates strongly to you.
Originally it was just the original version had it where they were combat reserved. Like they didn't. Yeah.
I'm
This
glad
was-
you got rid of that. That
What
was
was
Yeah.
the original version of it again?
It was called Combat Reserve. It was pretty much where they had a bit of a disadvantage to roll, like mostly attack rolls, skill checks, all that, when within 5 feet of a hostile creature. Which
Oh, okay. Was there not?
Yeah.
Was Cold Iron Origin not on the original version?
no, it was not.
Oh, I just remember. Maybe I
Yeah.
read it when we were going through last week, and that's why I remember it from the original. If you really want to put a drawback on something, I'm in Jeremy's camp, which I think it's a bad idea, and like that is something that I stay away from in races. Like I usually won't like playing things like Drow or things like the Cobalt because I don't like the sunlight sensitivity. I don't like having to think about that all the time. And I think there's a large group of players that are like that. If you feel really strongly about it and want that flavor, I would say at least bring it down to just you have disadvantage on checks made using equipment made from solid iron, like something like that. That's really niche because it has to be just solid iron and like.
Even if it had to be like, even if you made it attack rolls and ability checks made using equipment, like that would even be kind of, we're getting there. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But
So
yeah,
basically just
vulnerability
the-
is just
yeah,
that's
the
not gonna
removal of
work.
the vulnerability. Yeah, I can see. I understand.
It's just too powerful. Or I'm
But,
sorry, too crushing.
I think you could maybe do something with it if you really care about it. But I, again, am in Jimring's camp, which is I think you should remove the downside.
Yeah, and I would also note that, like, you know, I see Blood Deuce in chat saying use the wording pure iron because it rules out wrought iron and steel. The problem is that's a nuanced distinction, and when, yeah, I just make the distinctions clear, not subtle. And in that's a subtle distinction. I think, you know, yeah, I don't know. I think the direction to go is just to pare it way down.
Yeah, it's just the pure iron, while it is clear in its intent, just has a lot of ways that it can be chosen to be interpreted. So,
yeah, and I'd just be scared about.
Everybody was asking what would happen if you go barbarian with the vulnerability and then you rage. I believe that vulnerability and resistance just neutralize each other to flat.
Yeah, they cancel out.
Yeah.
But
so
either way,
that's Cold Iron version. Those are our thoughts, and that's something that like sometimes you have to make design choices that you like. But that's just you know, my opinion. And I think Jeremy and I are on
Yeah, I
similar
mean,
page
the
there.
reason I had Cold Iron version there is to help. I know y'all mentioned before it was a bad idea, but considering that one of the features of a Pixie is their main flight, and
it
like
was to
how
try and
flight,
balance it, right?
yeah, especially
No.
with some other things that they're capable of doing. So
Yeah,
See, that's
as a
another
rule-
problem we're going to come to as we go through this. You can't, in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, adding a negative does not offset having too much positive.
yeah, I'm aware of that.
That's not how it works.
But let's
2
look at
2 does not equal 0.
let's look at Gossamer Wings and Pixie Dust kind of together here. So the Gossamer Wings, they give you 15 feet of flying speed, and then they interact with the Pixie Dust, allowing you to feather fall whenever you fall, and the option for someone to break them, as well as at 3rd level, Pixie Dust allows you to get a couple of spells, provided that your wings aren't broken, and the armor restrictions from Gossamer Wings will also apply to the target creature. You can't do them you can't have the wings while you're wearing medium or heavy armor, which is fine. That's convention actually for flying speeds in most cases. But these two features together, my first kind of big thought on these is both of these I think are a little bit muddied down. There's a bit too much going on in intricacies in these. For the Gossamer Wings feature, and I know some of this is, I know what some of these later sub-races have going on within them, and that they basically expend Gossamer Wings as a resource. Am I correct about that?
Yes.
So that's why you have some of these things in effect here. I think that Gossamer Wings should just give you a flying speed, and I think that Pixie Dust could be brought down to just, it gives you a standard spellcasting suite, as you've described it, while you have your Gossamer Wings, and maybe rather than incorporating Featherfall into the Gossamer Wings, put it as like a spell that you can cast on Pixie Dust, rather than going through the route of bestowing your flying speed onto other creatures, because that's a little bit wacky.
I very much agree with Pete. Gossamer Wings, and I think at this point, you actually don't want to call it Gossamer Wings. This should be called Flight, would be this mechanic. And it would say, your Gossamer Wings your beautiful yet frail Gossamer Wings allow you flight, right? You can fly at a speed of 15 feet while not wearing medium or heavy armor. And that, done. And even with Pixie Dust, right? Wouldn't even bother to say while you have your Gossamer Wings, just have Pixie Dust be a similar spellcasting suite, like Pete was saying, right? Give it Featherfall at first level. Give it, I guess you had Sleep at second level, and then give it, I don't know, Fly right at third level, and there you've got your spellcasting suite on it, right? And then what you can just have
get
is
away with Fly on this race.
I think you could, yeah, as a fifth level. I think that would work. And then once you actually go into the sub races, right, and you have a feature that like lets you expend your wings, on that feature, you'd say, once you've used this feature, you cannot use your Gossamer Wings or Pixie Dust feature until you complete a short rest, right? As a way of handling that, because right now you're trying to put it on the main race and you're going to put it again in the sub race, and like people say, it's just a little muddied. But I would definitely try and make this a lot simpler from that design point. It needs to be cleaner.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Agreed there. Let's talk Pixie Mischievousness. I actually like this a lot. It's just a really simple reinterpretation. Every Fey creature and every creature that is in some way related to the Fey has some type of magic resistance. The version that you gave it here is Pixie Mischievousness, which is you have advantage on dexterity and charisma saving throws against spells and other magical effects. That resonates a lot with me for Pixies, and I like that choice of paring it down, because full magic resistance on a race with Flight would be crazy powerful. And you took away a lot of the flight speed, which I thought was a good move too. You brought the flight speed to 15, and that's a good, like,
it's an improvement. It definitely is less powerful than 30 or 50.
15 is a pretty reasonable flying speed. I've never seen 15 on a race. It doesn't exist, does it?
Not on a real race. I think we maybe have made one in the past as a
Have
joke.
we?
I did during the end of the year goofy thing, but
it was one of those 15. I like 15 as a number, because it gives you that double move for 30, which is the standard, it's the yard of D&D. Let's talk these sub races now. Let's go through these sub races.
Well, before we jump onto those, so we've talked a little bit about the design things we've run into so far, and a bit of the playability issue. But something I just want to talk about before we even move on to the sub races is just the balance aspect. I know, you wanted the Cold Iron version to kind of offset some of the strength this race has, but that's just there's one example actually, chat. I think it was V Bunny mentioned with the Kobold, right? They have sunlight sensitivity as like a weakness to offset their pack tactics, which gives them advantage on attacks. Those actually do work to counter each other out, because, right, they both target the same thing, which is attacking in melee with a weapon, right? And so
even
that,
then,
like,
pack tactics usually...
Yeah, and even then it's too strong.
Still doesn't work, yeah.
But with this one, the Cold Iron version doesn't really act to counter the flight, because it's, attack rolls and ability checks and flight. It's apples and oranges. If there were some way that the Cold Iron version could actually offset the strength of the Gossamer Wings, that might be something. But it's just right now, right? I'm looking at mechanical and power. The Altered Fey is flavor. It's not power at all, really. Size is not power at all. Pretty standard ability scores. You got nature skill. You've got some resistances to saving throws, kind of like the gnome, and you've got flight. this already is. Oh, and you have spell casting. This already is really powerful, like without any of the sub race stuff. And so I'm just, just moving forward as we do look at the sub races. My thought is we gotta find something and somewhere that can pair back.
Well,
or if we can find a way to.
I want to look at the sub races here, because I think part of the design here is that you get a feature that takes away your flight.
Yeah, and maybe that's it.
So
Sure.
Let's see how that plays.
Okay. Just something to, and I guess that's something we could look at, right? Look for when we're moving forward.
Yeah. So the first one here we have is the Cloud Pixie. Living high among the fluffy clouds, sharing it with their giant allies, these pixies play tricks on unsuspecting landwalkers by spreading a small fog and making spooky noises like small children giggling or random creature calls. That's very cute. And then increases your wisdom score, which all of these are going to have an ASI. That was assumed. Mm-hmm. And then, so let's look at Misty Wings here. And these all kind of have a parallel effect. So your wings are formed of water vapor, much like a cloud. In addition to the effects of Gossamer Wings, you may, as an action, break your wings to create a 5-foot radius, 10-foot high cylinder of mist centered on yourself, but lose your flying speed. If we were going to do it this way, you'd want to say lose the benefits of your Gossamer Wings feature if we're going to rechange it to the way that we were talking about it before. The cylinder spreads around quarters, and the area is lightly obscured. It lasts until the end of your next turn, or until a wind of moderate or greater speed, at least 10 miles per hour, disperses it. And then also it gives you the Druid Calf cantrip, but allows you to create a small patch of fog or the giggle of a small child, in addition to the normal effects. So this, I don't know about other ones, like this one doesn't add a lot of power. Like this ability to create this one turn of kind of fog, actually as a trade-off for flight.
I'm not sure I would ever do it.
It'd be a hard sell to ever use this feature in exchange for losing your 15 feet of flight.
I guess maybe if I were like stuck in a dungeon, that could be helpful.
But it's definitely, there's flavor to it. But like looking at this Clouds Pixie, I don't think there's an issue with the balance in adding these two features to it. Jeremy, where are you at on that?
I don't think so either. Obviously, the ASI is expected. Yeah, Misty Wings doesn't actually make anything more powerful. Druidcraft, I mean, it doesn't really.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Druidcraft doesn't really do much, right?
So let's look at
predict the weather, grow a seed, harmless sensory effects. I would note that because it already lets you make the sound of like small animals and faint odors and stuff, it might not even be necessary to add these extra effects. I'm sorry. You were saying it's specifically you can only do those features of Druidcraft. Is that what you're getting at, Frog?
No, it just adds on to it. Like you actually choose those as options for the effect.
I gotcha. Yeah.
Okay.
I want to point out that the original version of Misty Wings, it had it where it was a 10-foot radius, 10-foot high, and it was heavily obscured. And y'all did not like the idea of that at the time.
The Misty Wings, it might have been. I have to know about the context in which you read it originally. This just doesn't do a ton as it stands, but I mean, that's also fine. Technically speaking, Druidcraft can already create a small patch of faint fog or the giggle of a small child, because those I would rule those as harmless sensory effects. But
yeah, I don't think you actually need all this extra text on Mistcraft.
You might be able to just say that you know the Druidcraft cantrip.
I mean, I think the small patch of fog is like debatable, so I'll acknowledge that. This just feels like a lot of text here for you can make a small patch of fog. You know what I mean?
But I think also some of it is meant to. We'll see what the other ones are to see how they parallel. Because all of these pixies, and I'm gonna brush over the flavor in some places here because we are getting to about our halfway point now.
Oh my god.
Yeah, we've been going for a while. So we got the candy wings here, which is the mint pixie. And that is, you can resolve your Gossamer wings to heal all of your allies equal to a 1d6 plus your level hit points, but lose your flying speed. That's a much bigger effect. That's actually a pretty huge effect. This one, my first instinct is that it's on the side of too strong, because you wait until you're about to go down, and then you do this really big heal for everyone around you, including yourself. And then you lose your flying speed, but it works a little bit better with it, where before the flying speed, you're kind of giving up an ability to escape to instead hide. Here, you're just giving yourself a bunch of health, which is a little bit stronger. The Sugarcraft ability, you get to create the effect of showering nearby creatures with diminutive granulates of sylvan sugar, which is a cool effect. I'm just going to go right on ahead and we'll do all these at once. The Paul Pixie, Blood Hungry. These are traitorous bloodline who attempted becoming disease-ridden, bloodthirsty creatures. Oh, geez. Also, can we just scroll down and look at the art? Because the Paul Pixie, the Mint Pixie, and the Cloud Pixie are all here. And Frog drew all of these, and they look so dope.
I'm actually going to really zoom in a little bit. Pete, can you keep going? I'm going to zoom in on these guys so we can get a good picture of them all.
Yeah, I'll keep going through the Paul Pixie. So Blood Hungry allows you to do a special melee attack that deals 1d4 piercing damage and allows you to regain hit points equal to the damage dealt, and that scales with level and also becomes magical at 5th level for the purposes of overcoming resistances. Do you gain that as a feature? Does Blood Hungry become a thing that you can always do once you've used this?
Pretty much. I mean, it replaces the Pixie Dust feature. So yeah.
Okay, that is actually
basically it's a trade-off of like the spell casting for being able to.
It replaces the Pixie Dust feature. I thought they were all wings. Okay. So
not all of them. This one it does have painted wings, but yeah.
This one just flat out. You don't give this up. This just flat out. You don't have Pixie Dust anymore. You have Blood Hungry instead.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I misinterpreted that. That's my mistake. I thought they were all following like a kind of a parallel pattern here. Okay, so you have this instead of.
Yeah, because you actually lose, like as original flavor suggests, you lose the magical power. Because
here's the problem, right? From just a balance perspective, there's already a race in the game, the lizard folk, and one of their core mechanical features, they have a swim speed. That's one, and then the other one is that they can bite someone once per short rest to gain a couple of temp hit points. I mean, this is way more powerful with it.
Yeah, that's class level.
Yeah, and then. I mean, I think you have the right concept of you can't have the spellcasting suite and have this, but yeah, this is just I think too powerful. It just does too much.
From like a class feature standpoint, like you could make a fighter that gets to do this 4 times, and they become a fighter with a powerful attack that just heals all the damage they do.
Yeah, if you're gonna have it, it needs to be a once per rest you do this thing.
Yeah.
I would also, like Pete was saying, it's really weird in convention to have this kind of scaling in a race. Mechanically, I like it. Like, I would prefer if races in 5th edition had scaling features.
I think the Dragonborn's about the only one that has a scaling feature like this, but that is also for a 1 a day.
They do?
The Dragonborn breath weapon scales, yeah.
Does it really? Oh my god, it does. Wow.
Yeah.
I just forget because it's so underwhelming usually.
Yeah, the Dragon Breath weapon is kind of that's a whole nother subject. And then Tainted Wings lets you break off your wings, and
I guess Warforged and Asmar also have scaling features. So I guess it's not the only one. Maybe you can keep it, but that's a huge power change.
Yeah, and it poisons. The Tainted Wings poisons for 1 minute. You probably want to give them a chance to break out of that poison. Failing the save, and then them just being poisoned flat out for a minute is really devastating. So that's a really powerful effect as well. And then Woodland Pixie is the dexterity one. You can expend. Oh wait, so you gave
Most
me a.
well known of the Pixie races. The wings go brightly as they flutter around the thick forest they call home. Not only is this light something that illuminates the area around them, but it can also reveal hidden creatures that intend to bring them harm. And then, yeah, like people were saying, dexterity, and then glittering wings. Your wings shimmer and sparkle with tiny lights. In addition to the effects of gossamer wings, you can cast a light cantrip targeting your wings. At third level, you can cast a light when you cast a light cantrip in this way, and a non-good creature that enters the bright light of your wings must make a dexterity saving throw or be treated under the effects of the fairy fire spell as long as they remain within the area of bright light. Can I use this effect again until after a short or long rest? And as an action, you may break your wings, target yourself up to 3 creatures to target yourself up to 3 creatures within the 5th level trait of Pixie's feature instead of 1 creature. I see. So basically, you can give more people flight instead of just 1. And you lose.
Yeah, but you also lose the flying speed after that per breaking your wings.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's start big picturing because we have all the individuals.
So by the way, I do really love this art. One thing that I think adds so much to something like this is having that art. Something that we never.
Yeah, we don't have the ability.
We don't know how to art. Our hands only destroy. But yeah, go ahead and take the big picture suite.
Let me grab. I gotta get the rubric up for me to look at as we go through. I'm gonna start with the easiest one. Space, yes. The Pixie. There's room for the Pixie. It's cool.
I want to put a caveat on that.
Oh, interesting. Go ahead.
So you went with a bunch of sub races here: Cloud, Mint, and Paul, and Woodland. And I think Woodland Pixie is so, iconically Forgotten Realms, generic D&D. Cloud, I think, works, right? Because it, I think it just works in a generic setting. Pal works, even if I don't know if that's a legitimate thing in the Forgotten Realms and generic D&D history, or if that's something that you created because you thought it was really cool, but it works really well in that genericized fantasy land. Mint Pixie, I love for D&D time, but it actually doesn't do that because it's so inherently and innately D&D time. Just something to consider. I'm not going to dock you the space point on it, but if you were creating this for a more generic audience, which is kind of our goal here, right, of the wide appeal audience, that's something that would definitely be challenging. That would be something that would be a little weird for a lot of folks.
That's a very good point, Jeremy.
Yeah, that's it. I mean,
you gotta be careful.
Not a deal breaker in this case.
When you're whenever you're building something and you're trying to make it at as high of a level of quality as you possibly can, you want to not include homebrew in the sense of this. Not include information that's relevant to a specific homebrew world that you're running,
or even a specific campaign setting, right? In this case, the only prerequisite, if you're going to make this for any table, is just that there's a Feywild in existence somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And I guess there are silly and unsilly courts, but that's so iconic to D&D in every situation.
Yeah, the creatures were therein. When you see something like this pop up in Unearthed Arcana or other content of similar nature, there'll be a table over, a kind of a gray box over on the side that's here's what these things are like in this world. Here's what they're like in this particular campaign setting. So this could almost be you could almost have a gray box here's what pixies are like in the land of D&D time, and include something about it if you wanted to do that. That's a way to work something a little bit more niche into something more general. But good point. But point for space, I think, is done. Let us talk about the.
Let's talk about flavor, because I think flavor is the next kind of most important thing to think about.
Yeah,
I'd say flavor might even be more important than space.
Flavor is the most important thing on races.
I think you got the point for it.
I like the flavor point.
I like what you did to rationalize them being small creatures. I think that's a really cool concept. I think taking the decision and making the move to go in that direction is the correct move. And I think the way you rationalized it makes a lot of sense from a flavor and fun perspective. Instead of being like, oh, why aren't I tiny? It's, oh, what's the cool reason I'm small? Right? And I think moving in that direction gives something to inspire the player, which is so important about that flavor point, as opposed to, yeah. Right.
The flavor is, I think, works as it stands. There's a couple things that we were commenting about as we're going through that we thought would like heighten the flavor in places. Like we wanted that extra chunk at the beginning, that extra size chunk in the beginning, right up.
Yeah.
But it doesn't need that. And currently, you have achieved what the flavor of the Pixies is, which you have made something that feels like this is a whimsical Feywild, like small flying creature, and that definitely comes across in everything here. You know, the sub races
your age,
all have
right up, your alignment stuff.
Yeah, that's all very good. I think
I really
think
actually
crushed it on that.
I really liked is it Pal Pixie or Paul?
It's pronounced Paul.
Okay, just Paul. Okay.
It's like a gloom over something.
Can
In
I
this case, it's over their entire bloodline.
play a Paul Pixie named Paul?
And Pete, you've taken this very dark twist and made it goofy again.
That's what I do. It's my whole brand. Let's talk. I think this is
point for both of those.
This is the next easiest one for me, and that is the design point, which is I don't think we can give you the design point on this one. There was a lot of places where, like for example, the pixie dust and the gossamer wings, the general, rather than going through and telling you all of like the small nitpicks, because we already did a lot of that and talked about it a lot, I think that as a rule, you need to work on like just paring some of these down and trying to get your features down to their simplest possible form that you can think of that works. That's what it means to have elegant design, is to have the clearest mechanics you can in the least number of words.
Alrighty.
Now,
go ahead, Jeremy.
One thing that we actually totally brushed over was in this pixie dust, right? That any enchantment spell 3rd level or lower, you can use your pixie dust in place of material components. I have no idea what the implications of that are, and because that can like change.
I can actually explain that.
Well, just a second. And because that can change throughout the game, like they could create new enchantment spells that have severe, like, and intentionally limiting material components. I would be very cautious about including that as a design aspect, because you're referring to something in the game that you do not have control over, which is what new spells are created for 5e. But go ahead if you had something you want to say in there. I don't need to shut you off.
Well, the reason I had it where it only affects enchantment spells of 3rd level lower is because of the original idea for pixie dust in D&D, which was originally made from pixie wings.
Yeah, and I get where you're coming from with that. What might be a different direction to go is, your gossamer wings, right, count as a spellcasting focus for your spell's magical effects. That might be a cool different direction, which still gets that vibe across a little bit.
Yeah, I never even thought about that.
I'm just a little worried about, like, specifically the design of referring to material components in spells, because it's totally, you have no control over where that goes in the future and how powerful this either right now isn't or in the future is, right?
Alrighty.
It's that kind of constraining your design a little bit to like make sure. I mean, that's a nitpick, but that's kind of my thoughts on that. Any ideas?
On that specifically, I mean, I'm largely in your court. Again, I mean, that kind of boils back down to kind of what I was saying, which is just go with the simplest thing that you can find that gets the idea across. So I think that's a good direction. I'd like to talk a little bit about the overarching mechanic that you're using here of removing your gossamer wings as basically a consumable in these sub-races to make an effect. And I personally am not crazy about that mechanic. I think it might be a little bit too complicated for a race. I like the execution a little bit more on the Cloud Pixie than the Mint Pixie per se, because the Cloud Pixie has this like, the trade-off feels more comparable with Flight, but just like a big payoff for getting rid of your wings doesn't quite make sense. And also, I'm worried that if either the payoff's too good or it's not good enough, and then people won't want to use it because they don't want to give up the huge value that is a fly speed. So I just think it's a really dangerous space to play in. So I don't know, like the implementation as it stands, I'm sorry I don't have, I'd have to think about it more, like a better like suggestion of how you could get that vibe without, you know, scrapping and kind of starting over it here. So I need to think about that more, but.
The thing for me is that's the one place in this that I actually don't get the flavor mark. I tear off my wings and get a cool consumable effect. Just doesn't feel Pixie to me.
Well, I don't think the idea is tearing them off. To me, it was more like you're dissolving your wings into pixie dust to do this magical effect.
Yeah.
Okay, that maybe makes more sense. All right, I was getting a little. Okay.
I just couldn't really think of the wording for it, so I just chose broke. So.
Yeah, no, I think the word "broken" confused me. That's where I went.
Yeah, I got the flavor. Like the flavor of it did work for me. But
I think if you can find another way to say that that's not broken, that might make more sense, because I was so confused. I was kind of like, this is weird. Oh, also having a nitpick like targeted attack against the wings, just get rid of that. That doesn't need to be there.
All right.
Yep,
Yeah,
agreed.
That's just weird.
Adrian P and V Bunny are asking about regeneration and restoration on limbs with regards to pixie wings. That's an interesting question, which you will probably need to address. I actually don't even know.
If we just don't say broken, we don't have a problem.
My question is, my little like in response to that is that the wings themselves are made of magic. So would that affect that?
Yeah, no, I'm with you on what you're saying. If it doesn't say that they're like just being broken off like a piece of your body, then it
yeah, you can say, and the magic of the wings is expended until you finish a short or long rest.
Yep.
I mean, or long rest or whatever. It doesn't really matter.
If you go that direction, but I would almost encourage you to try and get what you want that to be, like the cloud thing and the the candy wings and stuff. I'd try and get those effects in there without sacrificing the flying speed if you can.
Well,
All right.
I don't even know, man. Like, here's the thing. I think if you're gonna use the flying speed, because right now, all that aside, Pete, right?
Let's talk the balance point, actually. Yeah.
I mean, it's too much. There's still too much here.
Well, let me say this. I actually think that with the ability scores only, the base chassis is a balanced Pixie.
I agree. I think you're right. I think even if you nix the cold iron aversion, if just the extra features that the sub races give are what makes this too strong over what it normally is. And it's like, one of the things I could see is your pixie dust, right? It's supposed to be a spellcasting suite, right? And then it's eventually going to be like a spellcasting suite. If the casting those spells also expended the Gossamer Wings and you just went all in on Gossamer Wings or a resource, you fly until you either cast a spell or do one of these cool features from your sub race. If you went all in on that, I think you could find that balance.
All right. I mean,
but I don't think you can give them flight and a spell casting suite and some skills and resistance to spells, dexterity and charisma saves. I don't think you could give them all of that and still somehow make this balanced. It's already going to be so hard with the resistance against dex and charisma saves and the flight. Just that alone, you've made a monster of a race. So strong. So just I would say, and Pete, your thing's totally valid, right, with getting rid of that. But I think if you're going to get rid of the dependence on the Gossamer Wings, you're going to need to cut out more than just. You're going to need to cut stuff out. I mean, something's going to have to go.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm interested. Pete, talk.
I don't know. I think a +2/+1. Okay, let's talk about what this has. I actually think that, let's just call it, for sake of argument, a 2/1 ability score, because there's variation there. 25-foot movement speed, 15-foot fly, dual creature type.
That doesn't have any magical effect. It doesn't have any balance implication.
The nature skill.
Sure, skill.
Dex and Charisma saves, which Charisma is uncommon, but Dex is very common. So one really good save, one kind of iffy one.
I'd say Charisma is actually a lot more common on monster saves, but go on.
And we're nixing Cold Iron Aversion in this reality.
Yeah.
And then it's Gossamer Wings and Pixie Dust. So second level sleep. And are we saying it's the...
I mean, it's Featherfall, Sleep, and Fly.
Okay, yeah.
Featherfall, Sleep, and second level, and Fly are the three.
I would want to make Fly self-cast only, but that's
kind of contrary to the Gossamer. Like, there's no point in having it then.
To improve your flying speed, make you 60 instead of 15. Would be the idea. That was how I was imagining it in my mind, but we'll assume it's not that because that's just my own thinking. And then the Gossamer Wings is just you have 15 feet of flying speed is what that is.
All right.
I actually think that's a powerful, but
dude,
okay.
if a player came to me and said, "Hey, I have a race that I made that I want to play in your game. It's got 15 feet of fly speed. It has advantage on saving throws against dexterity and charisma things, and I have a spell casting suite," I'd say no. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't allow that. That's incredibly powerful. That's the most powerful race in the game.
You think that that's more powerful than straight up magic, than poison and immunity and straight up magic resistance? I know we don't want to be. I know it's a bad look when
I think that's more powerful than the UNT.
I think you might be overvaluing 15 feet of fly speed.
No, because in 2 rounds you're 30 feet in the air. That's the thing about fly speed. In half of the environments, when you're not in a confined space, you're out of reach of everything. And if you're a spellcaster, which, let's be real, you're getting charisma, you're getting dexterity, which is
this is a spell
or a ranged. Yeah, you're a ranged option for the most part. Like I fly 30 feet in the air. All right, they can't hit me anymore because they're wolves. I shoot them for 10 minutes. Like there's a reason everything with a fly speed is banned in the Adventurers League. You can't play them because it's so powerful. And 15 feet versus 50 feet, it matters, but not a lot.
I mean, it's a difference between an entire turn at early levels when combats are quick versus...
It's not, though. At early levels, it's meaningless because creatures have 5 feet of reach, and so you fly at 15 feet and you're out of reach. It's meaningful when you're up against giants, where they've got reach to hit 15 feet up. But at low levels, it's not.
I don't know if I don't know if I particularly agree, but...
And this is a really cool thing that we're showing here because Pete and I do disagree sometimes. But
I think, like, the way that I design encounters, I don't view 15 feet of flying speed as that overwhelming of a threat as the way that I do 50 feet of flying speed, like in Asmar. I think it's a lot weaker than... I'm not talking about Asmar, I'm talking about Aarakocra.
Aarakocra, yeah.
The Aarakocra flying speed I view as like, that is a class feature. Because not only is it 50 feet of flying speed, it's your dash is 100 feet too. Like,
yeah, but like, I don't know.
I don't know. I think it's closer than you think, but maybe it's also better than I'm saying. It depends on the campaign to an extent.
I think we can easily come to one agreement, and that is right now it's too strong with the subclasses. Sub-races.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking about just the first thing as a chassis.
What's really interesting is Pete and I have 2 very different directions on how we address it. Right? Pete would make the Gossamer Wings a more reliable, consistent feature. I would put everything on the expendable Gossamer Wings. And so maybe if you think about like how you'd want to, like which one's more appealing to you and which direction you'd want to go, or maybe, oh God, my cat is being crazy. Maybe even do both and see which one you like more, right? If you want to keep iterating on this design, that might be a cool thing to think about because this is how design works. You run into an issue, which in this case, we think we've addressed an issue, it's too strong. And we have different ideas on how to fix it. And both are totally, can happen, right? We can tone everything else down, or we can cut some stuff,
Yeah, it's there's kind of, I guess, the bottom, one big thing or a lot of small things is kind of the question, and I guess in the case. But Yeah, I think that's those are a couple of directions that you could go, and the balance is too strong as it stands, so we can't give you the balance point. But I want to talk about what I think will be the most contentious point, and that is the playability point on this guy. So you got 2 so far. Jeremy, where do you stand right now? Because I want to give the playability point, even though there are playability issues with this, because I think that the issues that are playability issues more stem from design problems than the actual gameplay. Like, I feel like we already got the playability issues in the design.
Playability, right, in our thing is, would adding this to game disrupt the flow of gameplay, and are any of the features here frustrating to the GM or players? You know, could they be frustrating? And I think there is one feature on this, Cold Iron Aversion, that
that's the thing
absolutely kills that, because I think it'd be very frustrating to the player. Additionally, and this again was a design thing that was pointed out, the ability to always have this healing attack on the Pixie. God darn it. The Pixie. I think there's an issue. Like, that would infuriate a dungeon master to just give a player the ability to auto heal all the time. In fact, that could even irritate some other players. Of just like, all right, so you're always at full health at the beginning of every session. Great. All right, that's fun for me, the wizard, who's like, we're 5 steps through the dungeon, you know, we're 5 rooms through the dungeon and I have 1 hit point and no more hit dice. You know what I mean?
See, that's a balance thing to me, not a playability thing.
I think it's both. I don't think it's one or the other.
In what way do you see it?
Regardless, I personally would say that the Cold Iron version is enough of a playability issue to strike.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about the Cold Iron version.
Oh, we already did. I think it's too much.
As a playability issue.
Okay.
I see it as a design issue.
I'm sorry, Adrian was saying that the Druidcraft is a playability issue because no DM wants to track the weather. Lol. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's both. It's playability. Cold Iron's playability and design, I think. I think it's got problems in both. It's not just one thing. I think you get the half point because I wouldn't give it to you, but Pete would.
Maybe, I don't know. The reason to study on my career, I just like this design philosophy.
One thing.
Well, it's not even that it's just one thing. It's just I don't like docking a point for something that is like taught in the design philosophy of 5e by the way they do things, which is to like put a drawback on something to make it work. Because like my issue is that they put a like 5e tells you that it's okay to put a drawback on something, and you and I are both of the opinion that you should never do that, and it's bad design.
Well, so are they. They realized it was a mistake. You know what I mean? Like, you're right. If you look at Vol's Guide to Monsters, that's how they do it. But then they realized that was an error and undid it. Like, you know what I mean?
They didn't undo, like, there's stuff in the design, like, they still believe in sunlight sensitivity. So, like, I just think that this is, I don't know.
When's the last time they released a creature with sunlight sensitivity?
I think it was the Cobalt, but they took the opportunity to update the...
yeah, they didn't bother to give it to the Deep Gnome.
The Deep Gnome just never... The Deep Gnome was an elemental evil. That was before.
Oh, was he already an elemental evil too?
There hasn't really been a big round of races other than from region-specific places. But Drow is the big one, but like...
I'll give it to you. I won't, I guess, dock it, but
you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm reticent to dock Cold Iron Aversion for playability, even though I agree that it's a playability issue. Which is, I know, an interesting, like...
I don't know. I think it's specifically the vulnerability drawback is just...
It's too much. I mean, it's undeniably too much, but I'm on the fence. Want to do the half? I'll agree to the half with you.
Yeah.
Because that is also the only playability. Everything else on this, I think, is fine. Even the poll thing, I don't see as a... I just think that's just too strong.
If I may make a point about the Paul Pixie's Blood Hungry,
Sure.
it does say it is a special melee attack action that uses your natural weapon, so you more than likely have to be within 5 feet to use it.
Yeah, that doesn't. That doesn't. Yeah. Like, don't get me wrong. If you're a sorcerer, okay, sure. But if you're like a fighter, which you have dexterity and strength, there's no reason you can't be a fighter with this. Like,
True.
I want to point out Blood Deuce and V Bunny. Even Blood Deuce was saying, even beyond Cold Iron Aversion, this doesn't deserve the ability point. I appreciate you guys trying to be kind, but this is Lich's Lair. I don't give anything but my opinion. I'm not trying to be kind. I'm just telling you guys what I think on that.
Playability refers to a very specific thing.
Maybe that
is
you
not
have
is it
something
ready
that
to print.
Yeah, maybe that you're thinking of playability as something different, but I'm referring to at the table.
Does this disrupt gameplay?
Is this going to disrupt gameplay? And there's issues in the design, but I don't think like I would have an issue running for this. You think this would be frustrating to play alongside or run a game for? I don't necessarily agree, but
yeah, I see Blood Hungry as potentially being an issue, and that's like. And Cold Iron Aversion. I don't see anything else that actually ticks that other mark for me. But I mean, that's a kind of that actually is probably the most subjective part of our rubric is playability, more so even than flavor or space, which is weird. Flavor is not the most subjective feature.
Yeah, that's true.
But either way, I think this is overall right. Let's hit that overall again now. I think a huge step forward.
Oh yeah, undeniably.
You know, you had tons of features on the other ones that was just too much going on. There was a little too much power everywhere. With this one, you're in a lot better spot to the point where like Pete and I are kind of, we don't even agree in the direction of how to, balance from here. And, I think normalizing the power of these sub-race features is the next step. With obviously Cloud Pixie being a little too weak, and then the Mint and Pal being a little too strong.
And the chat's kind of in agreement on this point, and I agree with them as well, which is there's a little bit too much going on here, and that's definitely true. Paring down features and getting them down to simpler points where you can will be a great place to start. I'm really excited if you decide you want to look back at this, but I think that we got the I think we're settled on 2.5 as our score, Jeremy.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Frog, you have finished at 2.5 points. Do you have any final thoughts on your Pixie before we wrap up?
I mean, if I had to give it final thoughts about what I'm going to go through, like going forward from here, it will be toning down Cold Iron Aversion a good bit, which is I'll more than likely get rid of the vulnerability. But I will probably keep the disadvantage for it.
Yeah, I mean that's a choice. I'm not still crazy about that, but definitely get rid of the vulnerability is the good way to go.
Yeah, as for the wings and pixie dust together, I can see that happening, and just having the wings as a whole just be the spellcasting focus with charisma as a spellcasting modifier in that regard.
Oh, you mean for the spell suite?
Yeah, for both Gossamer Wings and just putting both of them together, pretty much. The Gossamer Wings and
very interested. Very interested to see where you go with it.
Me as well.
Definitely getting closer though. You're getting a lot closer to where it needs.
Yeah, I really like the idea of playing a Pixie. I would love to.
He loves his Feywild.
Yeah, I love my Feywild. Yeah, you were hitting me in my home on the whole race, of course. We certainly have that one in common, Frog. I know that Frog, you may be a bigger Feywild fan than me. I cannot deny this. But Frog, thank you so much for sharing your Pixie with us and giving us the opportunity to some good debate on this one, Jeremy.
Yeah, you see, it's crazy. I think when Pete and I come in here and talk about some of our other content, like the genie the other week, right? So I was like, "Oh wow, Jeremy, it's so great." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know it's great. We talked about this for fucking hours. Of course it's great. We've already gone through everything about this. We were showing off the genie last week, and I think being able to see this kind of this is how we actually like strongly feel about these things, right? These are our initial thoughts. And keep in mind, these are initial thoughts. Things may be able, may change, especially upon new revisions. Like, last time when Frog was saying we didn't like the heavy obscurement, this time we didn't like the light obscurement because it was too weak. Where's the middle ground? And maybe heavy obscurement is the right balance here if it, takes out your gossamer wings and stuff.
In other places, yeah.
And it's like, it's the context of features that often change, but it's cool.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you so much for having the courage to come up and let us really pick apart your Pixie with a fine-tooth comb. We've broken the wings of the Pixie, and as such, the Lich's Lair consumes another soul. Jeremy, do the thing.
Oh, wait.
Also,
say it again, Pete.
Thanks so much, Frog. Wait, hold on a second.
No problem.
Frog, thank you, my man. I'm going to move you down for now, but we really appreciate you submitting your Pixie.
We do very much appreciate you guys. And if anyone else wants to share their stuff on the Lich's Lair, just talk to us. We go through a pretty rigorous review of stuff, and hopefully you guys find it helpful. So thank you again, Frog. We love you.
All righty. Yeah, I'll probably come back within 2 months with a better one, I hope.
we will see. Well, I think we'll see it. We'll see. Pete, shall we?
And actually, after Jeremy plays this thing, we're also going to take a break because it's late.
We'll be back.
Puny mortals, dare you to enter into the Lich's Lair?